you know, now that you're recording.
No, I'm recording. That's why I'm recording. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So what we were saying is as follows: if the lowest level of awareness, now that it's officially recording, had to do with the stone being placed in the person's lap, and when the stone was being placed in the person's lap, we find it very difficult, firstly, to understand, as Gavin was saying, why the person that placed the stone in somebody's lap isn't responsible for the payment, because as it's being, that guy did it on purpose. He did it, he knew something could go wrong. What are you doing putting a stone in somebody's lap? Okay, so either Arthur's become a physician now, or
No, I'm going to go make some coffee while I'm talking to you.
Yes, he's leaving the private ward, that's why. He's in the public. He's in the Rishut Harabim, Damon.
Yes.
The hospital.
Yeah.
I'm going from the private to the public. And I want to be responsible so I don't have to cause any damages. Be negligent.
That's very cool. So what we were talking about is that Gavin asked an obvious question, but I think it was on the mark. Is that why is the person that put the stone in somebody's lap not responsible for that payment? He is the most negligent. What did he think would happen? Did he think any good would come from it? So I need to speak to Rabbi Cohen with that. I'd just like to pace. Hang on. Come on, William. I'd just like to pace. Sorry, there was the cat on the keyboard. I'd just like to pace when I ask Rabbi Cohen something, because I don't want to bug him for every little thing. So what I'd like to do, Gab, I hope you don't mind, is when there's 5 or 6 issues, quickly bring it to his attention and put it rather than bugging him all the time. It's quite
Why should he be patur? The guy that puts a stone on someone. Why should
Rabbi Cohen be patur from helping us?
No. Why should he be patur? It's just silly. What did he think?
It doesn't make sense. But what we're saying is here, let's work on an assumption. This will help us get through it. Let's make an assumption is we don't know. The guy was sleeping. He doesn't know who put it in his lap. Let's use that as an assumption, because that could be a realistic case. You wake up, you get up, and the stone that you have in your lap suddenly kills somebody, and now you're on trial for your life. Now, nobody saw, everybody was sleeping, nobody saw who's put the stone in your lap. For all they know, you could put the stone in your own lap. Do you understand what I'm saying? So let's work that as a basis that they don't know who the stone putter is. Kev, let's work it like that. And that the stone...
And there's no one knows.
No one knows. Let's work.
It just appeared. The guy just saw it there. Obviously, wasn't asleep, and he woke up.
Yeah, and the problem is he didn't.
It appeared.
So the Gemara is saying because he never saw it there. Why? The second question is why is he responsible? And we learn he's responsible because whether or not, oh my God, the cat's lying on the keyboard. We're having fun and games here. Whether or not this is not YouTube quality. I've got this cat on the keyboard. I'm sorry, mate.
James, don't you wish I was doing the editing?
I so do. So, all right, guys, let's just get into it, please. So the first thing of it is we know that whether it was unintentional or unwitting, that you still pay for nezek shalom, shalom, the actual damage, but you don't pay for the 4 other things. But we have a problem because up in the Gemara, Gavin, we learned something that you brought to our attention. And that what you brought to our attention was, listen, it actually also discussed the issue of pain through the Gezerah Shava. We learned that you don't pay only for actual damage, that you pay for the pain aspect. That's what it came to tell us by mentioning a wound in the place of a wound instead of a wound for a wound. There was a source in Vayikra, there was a source in Shmot. And we're saying, well, why did it teach it both? It was repeated already with the words, if you shall name your fellow. Does that make sense? So you went from the general covering everything, and now you went specific. Now you went specific twice. A wound for a wound in the place of a wound. So we come to learn that you pay also for pain apart from actual damage. Now below, we're learning that if a stone was put in your lap and you get up and you injure somebody, you only pay for actual damage, but not the 4 other things. So that was the question that we were going to answer about Cohen. Why is it contradictory within the same page of the Gemara? Are we all up to date? Has anybody got any questions?
No, I understand. I'll be back in a second.
Okay.
Keep going.
Guys, any other questions? Kevin,
I'm fine.
I'm going to need some feedback. All right. Now, we're going to say the next thing. In regard to the laws of Shabbat, he is not liable because the Torah has forbidden only a calculated act. What do we mean by this, guys? Before I give an explanation, I want you guys to work.
Or if it happens on Shabbat that he gets up and the rock falls, because the rock's muksa, Evan, it's muksa. So he shouldn't have handled the rock on Shabbos.
Okay, but you've got a great point. But then that should make him even more culpable for breaking the Shabbos. Not less.
But if he got up and only realized afterwards, if he got up in his days and the rock was there, didn't fall, then it's it's a shogeg.
Okay, that's exactly it. So it's a state of unawareness. So exactly as Kevin said, what is required here is that in order for you to be obligated for Shabbat, if you look at, I don't exactly know where it is, guys. It's somewhere in the 35th chapter of Shmot, okay? The Torah...
Should I get it? No.
No, well, we have to find like 20 or 30 lines underneath it, but it is in the 35th chapter, because it mentions the entire construction in the 35th chapter of Shmot, about the laws of the construction of the tabernacle, okay, the Mishkan. And then it goes directly into the laws of Shabbat. So it's Melechet and Machshavet have got the same sort of letters. So what's Machshava? It means you have to have intention for what you're doing. Now, if we're doing constructional work, the Nimukei Yosef and Rashi in Beitza 13b discuss that in order for you to break Shabbat, it has to be a calculated act. What does it mean, a calculated act? We're not defining doing something on purpose. That is a willful act. If you break Shabbos on purpose and you get the warnings and all the right boxes are ticked, they'll put you in a box.
That's intentional.
Penalty. So what we're saying is that's intentional and willful. But there's a difference between intentional of a different nature and not cognizant. Let me give you an example. You've got the day of Shabbat, right? Now, there's only two ways to break Shabbat. Tell me, guys, not Arthur, because Arthur's way ahead of all of us. Kevin or Gavin, what are the two ways to break Shabbat? The two major ways. Doesn't matter what you're breaking. What are the two ways to break it?
What do you mean by two ways?
I mean, either you're not aware that it's Shabbat. That's one of the ways.
Okay.
So what happens?
Shogeg or intentional?
No. Forget about the terms at the moment. I just want to talk about the concept. So 2:00 in the morning, I forget it's a Saturday morning at 2:00. I need to go and relieve myself, and in a half groggy state after a benzodiazepine enough to kill the cat, I stumble into the bathroom and I turn on the light so I can see what I'm doing. And since I can see what I'm doing, I purposefully turned on the light. So that is not accidental, but you need two factors in order to bring a chatas offering. The first factor is the fact that the act itself has a purpose. What do I mean a purpose? I turned on the light on purpose to see where I was going. So if I did that, it wasn't that I intentionally broke Shabbos, but I turned on the light on purpose. And therefore, I have to bring a chatas offering. That, guys, you got to know. So the act itself is purposeful. Then the second way to break Shabbat is that, so the first one, we're not aware it's the day of Shabbat. We're not aware where it's the day of Shabbat. The second way to break Shabbat is to not know that the act is prohibited on Shabbat. That's a separate category. So in other words, if I don't realize that I've just started keeping Shabbos, and I don't realize that picking flowers for the Shabbos table is a problem, you know, because it's my second week of the Shabbos project, and I got excited, and I put it all in a vase, and I'm having this whole Shabbos experience, and I don't realize that the act is prohibited. So in that case, did I pick the flowers on purpose, guys?
No.
Yes, I did.
No,
I
you
wanted
did,
to I wanted to put the flowers on the table, yes. But what I didn't do is I didn't know that it was prohibited on Shabbos.
Wasn't malicious.
Yeah, you can use the word malicious. I just killed plant life. That's malicious, but in this act, but Kev, what you're saying is right. We need to find the right word. So the right word is as follows: is that if for all intents purposes, we would not want to break Shabbat. That is the overall concept. So the only two ways to break Shabbat and still bring a chatas offering is either you don't know the act is prohibited on Shabbat, or you don't know Shabbat. One of the two.
So can I just ask you one question? Just in current time, you can't do the chatas offering, because I actually broke Shabbos unintentionally. I touched my phone to look at the message. I thought, I didn't realize it was Shabbos this weekend. I quickly put the phone back down. What do I do now? Because I can't do a chatas offering. It's completely unintentional.
Okay, so it's good to know. You must speak to Rabbi Albach, but I can give you a thought that on Yom Kippur, you must have a diary. Guys, this is, if you never learn anything else, this is a wonderful piece of advice, is that I've got an A5 booklet. Just give me a second. I'll show you what it's called. It's this daily journal of achievement, failures, assessments, etc. So what is this?
It seems to be full mainly with failures. Just looking at it.
You've just committed Lashon Hara. That's another thing you've just got to add in your diary.
No, I was just giving an example. I was giving a future example for when Kevin hits that subject properly.
I was going to say he's got that full of his secret successes, and I want the book.
So for that and that cheap shot, what you're going to have
to do? It's a joke. Please take it.
What you have to do on Yom Kippur is you have to mention both of those things. They're two separate categories, by the way, and it's part of your video confession. It's something that you've just got to be aware of. So keeping a book, it's part of a state of awareness. But I don't know how you would address it today. I'm sure Rabbi Albach would know. I don't know, mate. I don't know exactly. But Yom Kippur is keep a list of these things.
I'll give him a call today. I actually want to ask him something else as well. Thanks.
Set the cat alight, Yom Kippur check. And that was
8 cats alive.
That's how you make a cat go woof. You tell him alive.
Very funny. You put petrol on it and you laugh. It goes woof. That's exactly.
And you know how to make a dog go meow.
A lawnmower.
Put it in a freezer and put it to let your bounce. It goes meow.
So I've got another version of that. You take the cat, you put it through a chain, what's it called, like a chainsaw, and you put it through and it goes meow.
Yeah, but it does go meow.
Does go
meow. The cat goes meow already. You're going to make a dog go meow. That's good.
Ah, yeah, you got to put a dog through. Okay, so I messed it up.
The dog has to go meow. The cat can go woof, and the dog can go meow. You get the difference there.
I know. I also got mixed up. I'm tired. Let's continue. I apologize.
Okay.
Okay, I'll add it to my book.
I'm pleased you're all using your Gemara heads for murder. I mean, it's got to be something.
Shame that that brings back Ian. I was writing that book with Ian.
Yeah, that book on how
to get away with murder. Yeah, shame.
So, all right. So, guys. So, what we're saying, Kev, is that there's two ways to break Shabbat, and which one has to bring a korban chatas. One, you don't know the act is prohibited on Shabbat. The other one is that you don't know Shabbat. Now, in this case, you don't even bring a korban chatas. Why? It's even a lower level of awareness. Why don't you bring a korban chatas?
What's the example? Sorry, I lost concentration for 1 second.
Are you falling asleep?
No.
Okay.
I'm tired though, but I'm not.
Okay, no, it's okay. It's not.
I got up very early this morning.
You don't bring a korban chatas because you don't realize that you need atonement for it.
Not quite. Kev, what do you suggest?
Okay,
Korban Chatas is for intentional, isn't it?
No. Korban, yes. Kevin's right. Korban Chatas, no. You've got to be very careful what you mean intentional. If you know the act is prohibited on Shabbat, and you know it's Shabbat, that's considered a willful or intentional, and so there's the death penalty. What we're talking about is you missing one of the factors. So what factor are you missing? You either don't know Shabbat, or you don't know the act is prohibited on Shabbat. So what you're doing is intentional, meaning you purposely want to write down some notes, but you don't know it's Shabbat, or you don't know that act is prohibited on Shabbat. So what you're doing is intentional, but you don't know it's either prohibited or that it is in fact Shabbat. So that it doesn't have the factor of knowing it's Shabbat and being prohibited on Shabbat. That's what we mean by liable for the death penalty. So in this case, you don't even bring a korban chatas because he was sleeping, he woke up, got up, and a stone came from his lap and hit somebody or broke a vase below. And in that particular case, he wasn't aware that it was Shabbat when he first woke up, never mind anything. He wasn't even aware it was Shabbat. He didn't know what day it was. And number two, he wasn't aware there was a stone in his lap at all. There was no cognizance on his part of having anything in his lap. So therefore, it's not like you write, not thinking it's the Shabbos, where you purposely trying to write, or you're doing an act of cutting flowers, but you don't know that's prohibited on Shabbat. Guys, do you see the difference?
Yeah.
So what we're saying in the Gemara, what Rashi and Nimukay Yosef is saying, that the word melechet, which is one of the 39 melochot of Shabbos, the 39 categories of Shabbos, and the word machshevet, intention, are very, very similar in nature. That it has to be a calculated act of craft and design. And how do we know that? Because the juxtaposition between the building of the Mishkan and the types of malacha forbidden have to do with construction in the temple. Now, what we're saying is as follows. There is an opinion that when you're doing constructional projects, you have a blueprint. What do you have a blueprint? What's a blueprint, Kev? You design how
the plans.
Before you spend money. Yes, you do the plans before it costs you money. And you work out through architectural drawings what this whole thing is going to look like. So that is a purposeful design. Then you're obviously preparing your plumbing, your electrical, your foundations, etc. All of these are calculated acts. And therefore we find that in order to transgress Shabbat, you have to know Shabbat, and it has to be a calculated act that would mimic one of the activities in the Mishkan, and that would form the calculated act. All right, let's go to the next one. In regard to exile, he is not liable. Why is a person not liable?
God to exile.
What do you mean by exile?
Okay, so he's no one knows who put the stone in his lap. He gets up and there's a stone on his lap and he's on the second bunk bed. And somebody is below in the bunk bed and it tonks them on the temple and they end up having a hemorrhage 3 days later or 2 days later, the person dies. Now, they don't send him to the city of exile. Obviously, they don't give him the death penalty. Why don't they send him to the city of exile, the city of refuge?
Because it was a... Okay, so this is not unintentional. I mean, it is unintentional, but the other one's also unintentional.
Correct.
And they do send.
Why don't they send?
Unintentional.
Okay.
Is this because he wasn't aware?
Excellent, excellent. So, Kevin, what Gavin is trying to point out here is as follows, is that when you accidentally kill somebody, you still go to the city of refuge of exile. But that is because there's a certain amount of negligence involved. In this particular case, there's no negligence. The guy goes to sleep. He wasn't even aware that there was a stone in his lap. and he gets up and tongs somebody, there has to be, it says many times, shoigeg, when it talks about in the Parsha and in Makos with regards to the accidental killing and the commentaries, that there has to be a state of unawareness, meaning at a previous state there was a state of awareness. It's known as a lapse of awareness. So in other words, there's two different categories. If you have a lapse of awareness, you're responsible for accidental murder. Kev? Yeah, but I'm not quite sure. The screen now is facing you on the side.
I'm sitting sideways. I'm stretching my legs. That's why.
Okay.
That's why. It's just easier. I did stretch my legs because otherwise I cooped up under the table.
Are you looking at an external monitor?
Yeah, both. And I'm sitting long. My legs are stretched out fully. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So, Kevin, what we're saying is here is there can't be a lack of complete awareness. If it's a lack of complete awareness, then that obviously is deemed a mishap or an accident. There has to be what you call a lapse of awareness, not a total lack of awareness. What's a lapse of awareness? Is that you had an article where you were previously going target. Can
I give an example also?
Please give me an example. Give me an example first.
So the guy's chopping wood, and the handle of the axe falls off and whacks somebody and kills them. Falls off. He went at it. The force of his arms in chopping the wood made the handle fall off and fly into someone and hit them on the head and kill them. That's an example that's commonly used.
That is
that person goes to city of refuge for that.
Yes, you're right. That is the example given in Makot. That's the exact example. That, but why? It would seem then like a mishap, an accidental.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he was negligent at all.
It's not his fault. I mean,
okay, so let's
maybe he could have been more careful in holding it more securely.
Maybe he didn't check. Maybe he didn't check his hammer. That
exactly.
His chopper.
Exactly. So what we're saying is here
he was negligent.
Is that there's a negligence that if you use the tool often, you should know if something feels loose. You should check it and do a diagnostic beforehand. I was going to use a different example. It's almost the same thing as when you're dealing with aviation. Before every flight. Now, even if the plane is in perfect condition, they check each and every part, and they tighten each and every bolt, because you never know. So that's called, that's your due diligence. So what happens is if you're using a dangerous tool, you have to check in advance. I like the example where you knew something was dangerous, like you had to fix the brakes of your car, okay? And you knew they were giving you hassles, but you got busy and you forgot to do it. And a family member took out the car and the brakes failed. You are responsible for that person's accident because you were aware at a certain time that the brakes weren't working. You forgot, you had a lapse of awareness, and now you're responsible for that particular mistake. If you never had any awareness whatsoever that the brakes were faulty, that's an unavoidable mishap. In the case of the axe, exactly as Gavin says, you need to check your tools and you need to have the right technique. You can't suddenly use a chainsaw in the middle of mincha. Okay, why? Because before coronavirus, everybody davened on top of each other. It's not the place to take out a chainsaw. You generally don't take your axe unless people have been cleared from the site. That's why they call it a construction site, because the assumption is some idiot is going to be walking on the site and going to get himself tonked. So you've got to have this precautionary measure. So what we're saying is when we're looking at a next case where it's going to increase in terms of the level of awareness and culpability, at that case, you're going to be responsible for exile, but not at this case where it wasn't a lapse of awareness. There was no awareness whatsoever. What in this example would you give Arthur as an example of a lapse of awareness? In other words, this is no awareness. Somebody put the stone in his lap. Give me an example of a lapse of awareness.
Lapse meaning like he forgot. Basically what happened is somebody put it in his lap, he forgot about it, and then when he stood up, it fell down and tonked somebody in the head.
Good. So we'll give a more practical example, is that he was drinking a mug of coffee. And that mug,
Like the coffee one.
that mug when he, which we're thinking in the morning, that mug when he drank the coffee, it's empty, and he decided to just relax and carry on his conversation. And what happened is it was sitting and resting in his lap, and he got up, and that cup of that mug of coffee sprung up with him as he sprung up, and killed an infant crawling below.
Okay.
He was on the balcony. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Oak's in the balcony on Hazelwood, and it's one of those low-level balconies, right? And he's chatting with his mates, and he's got on his lap an empty coffee mug. He doesn't have a surrounding table, but what he should have done when he finished drinking it is put it on the floor next to him. He didn't. He put it on his lap. He gets up from the conversation because he then has to answer the phone, and the cup of coffee goes flying off over the balcony and tonks some toddler on the head on the first floor. Now that traveling 2 floors down is like a solid safe landing on the toddler's head. The toddler is no longer. Right. Now in that case, he has to go to the city of refuge, of exile, because the family, if they can catch up with him within a certain period of time, are entitled to take vengeance and kill him. That's why it's called the city of refuge, city of exile. It's like life imprisonment in a special city. Why were you negligent? Because at a certain point you were aware there was a cup of coffee mug in your hand, but you forgot about it, and now you are aware. It's different to being asleep and somebody placing that mug in your lap. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what we're saying is in regard to his Canaanite slave being set free as a result of this injury. So what we're saying is the stone in the lap, the guy got up and it took out the tooth or the eye of his slave. In that case, the rabbis say the slave goes free, but there is an opinion that Rabban Shem ben Gamliel says that the slave does not go free, because the rabbis say it doesn't matter if your intention was innocent. In other words, you never intended to harm somebody. That's the reason you don't pay the 4 other things, granted. But if you take out the tooth or the eye of your slave, either way, the slave goes free. It doesn't matter what your intent was, whether it was purposeful or accidentally. So the slave goes free. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says intent is everything. If it was an accident and you had a stone in your lap and you got up and it took out the tooth of a slave, the slave does not go free, because that's very different to punching your slave in temper. So they're 2 different things. The rabbis say intent means nothing. If you damage the slave, it's entitled that he earns his freedom. Fine. So then what example does it bring in this Gemara, Kev? It brings the following example. What was taught in a separate brisa, in a case where a slave's master was a doctor, and the slave told him, apply eye cream to my eye, and in doing so, the master accidentally blinded it because he was a doctor. Or he told his dentist, who was his master happened to be a dentist, scrape my tooth for me, and in doing so, the master accidentally knocked it out. It's the slave has toyed with the master and gone free. So why they use this term toyed with the master, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, is because he obviously set his master up for failure. He was hoping that it would go pear-shaped because losing a tooth is a very small price to pay. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
He's gained his freedom. So that's why
Especially if they knock out your wisdom teeth, that's like a bonus.
So no, that's very sore. It's rather a little.
Just repeat that, Damon. Just go back 1 minute, please.
Okay, Stephen wants to come on for a minute or so.
Yeah, bring him on.
You were saying it wasn't so. It was less damage if if the tooth was knocked out.
No, I'll tell you now.
You have to get rid of the slave is free to leave if the master knocks his tooth out, injures it.
I'll tell you now what the case is. I just want to say hello to Stephen. Hi, Steve.
How's it, Stephen?
Good, man. We're putting you on. We've got 4 minutes left. You're welcome to join. Okay. So, all right. So, Kevin, this is the case. We're talking about a guy that fell asleep and somebody put a stone in his lap. He gets up and that stone falls below a balcony, for example, where the guy was sitting on his balcony, and the slave was working in the garden, and it knocked out his eye or it knocked out his tooth. In that case, the rabbis say the slave goes free. He no longer has to have any more servitude. Right. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the slave does not go free because the intention of the master wasn't to hurt his slave. Why was it not to hurt his slave? Because it's different when you lose your temper and knock out the tooth or eye of your slave, and therefore, because you were abusive, you release him. The rabbis say intention is not an issue because the slave has gained his freedom by the damage you've caused him. The cost to you is that slave is now free. Okay? And then there's a brisa brought by Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, where it says if the slave asks his master, and his master happens to be a doctor or a dentist, listen, tend to my eye or tend to my tooth so that you can fix it. And the slave in that case accidentally loses his tooth or his eye, but it's because his master happens to be a physician and he was trying to help him, but in medical process, he lost that appendage. In that particular case, the rabbis say he's earned his freedom. I mean, he's lost his eye, and therefore he's entitled to go free. However,
I'm just on a meeting. So.
Okay. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says there was no malice here. He never hit him in temper. And since there was no malice and he never hit him in temper, in that particular case, there is no reason to set his slave free. It's not like he hit him abusively. He tried to medicate him. So this is an argument between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and the rabbis. Why? Because the verse states, and he shall destroy it, which implies that the slave does not go free unless the master intends to destroy it. All right, guys, we finished with this first ruling. I hope this has been a helpful share.
But Damon, the master was still negligent, even though it was unintentional.
No, not at this point. We're going to see, not at this point, because he wasn't, if he's not negligent, that he would go to the city of refuge. He's certainly not in this case. Remember, he fell asleep, somebody put a stone in his lap, and he woke up. It's not like he fell asleep with a coffee mug in his lap or he forgot it was there. That's the next case we're dealing with. This first case, somebody put a stone in his lap. He wasn't even aware there was something in his lap. It's not prior awareness where he had a lapse of awareness. There was no awareness here whatsoever, and therefore there was no negligence whatsoever. This is the case of least awareness.